Thank you for tuning in to the Urban Network Podcast. I'm Hewitt Pagenstecher, founder of Amygdala Media, and this podcast coincides with a monthly networking group that occurs on Zoom on the third Thursday of each month at 5:30. So if you're interested in attending local networking events, meeting some professionals and business owners in the Portland area, register at urbannetwork.biz. Now, our guest today is I'm extremely excited to have her on. She has a very unique business, and it's much more than that, actually. Her name is Nadia Doe. She's the lead facilitator and founder of Sacred Heart Medicine Sanctuary. Nadia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, no, it's been a good day, and I'm so excited to talk to you and learn more about Sacred Heart Medicine Sanctuary. I introduced it as a business, but it's also technically a church as well. Can you tell us and the audience a little bit about Sacred Heart Medicine Sanctuary?
Yeah, so it is a church. It's actually a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization. We help people work through plant medicine ceremony, specifically with psilocybin mushrooms. So we take a shamanic approach to our work, which is where the church aspect comes in, instead of the business approach.
Yeah, so you were the first organization to offer like above ground plant medicine or psilocybin mushroom ceremony in the United States. How did you start with plant medicine ceremony and therapy, and how did you go about starting Sacred Heart Medicine?
So I came to this work because I was unhappy. I was addicted to Adderall and alcohol and a few other things. I was unfulfilled in my job. I was kind of just spiraling and had untreated depression and anxiety. So I actually came to ayahuasca first, and that experience completely changed my life. Everything changed, and I discovered that I actually had a ton of childhood trauma that was unprocessed because it was so deeply repressed. And so it started there. It went from me working on myself to me answering a calling to help other people through this process. And so as I went down this path, I had actually an attorney show up in my life and offered to help me do the DEA paperwork. So there's a DEA process where you can request exemption to work with a Schedule I substance for religious reasons. It's actually a really in-depth process. It took us about 1.5 years to do the paperwork. And it's one of those things that it's kind of complicated because we had to admit that we were doing it to even ask permission, which is like saying, I'm already admitting that I'm doing something illegal in order to gain permission to do it, which took a lot of courage. And I don't think a lot of places are willing to put themselves out there like that.
Well, I'm glad you took that step and made that courageous step to be able to help other people. You know, a lot of people might not be super familiar with psilocybin mushrooms, of course. They might just know what they've heard or seen in movies and just think of it as like a hallucinogenic drug or something. But it's, obviously is so much more. And this might be a hard or impossible question to answer. But can you at all explain the effects that psilocybin can have on you, its benefits, maybe like what makes mushrooms magical?
So it's so interesting. I work with people who have zero experience with psychedelics to people who've been tripping on mushrooms for decades. And I can tell you for certain that people who come to this with that ceremony mindset or that mindset of, I'm going to heal something, it's not a drug trip. It's not a hallucinogenic experience, where you see dancing elves in the room. It's actually like a soul journey. It's a journey into yourself. And so it's all about your intention and the container that's created for you to have the experience.
So how is like getting or experiencing a shamanic having you or a shaman guide you through one of these experiences? How is that different than someone, consuming psilocybin mushrooms recreationally? Like, how do those experiences vary and compare?
Okay, well, I've never had a recreational experience, but when people come to me and they tell me about it, it sounds fun, right? It sounds like, oh, I go out into nature and I talk to the trees and I see fairies and I just want to dance or listen to music, that sounds like a good time. I'll be honest. I've never experienced that because every time I go into plant medicine work, it's like I'm reviewing aspects of myself or my childhood, or I'm processing trauma, or I'm looking at my ancestral line and processing trauma there. And so it's more of like a multidimensional experience and not a hallucinogenic experience, if that makes sense. Um, and
Totally.
work,
I mean, I know that that, like even like a lot of people don't necessarily experience hallucinations on psilocybin mushrooms. It could be more of like an emotional experience, right? Just
totally.
more of changing your own perspective on, your own life and the world in general. And people from my research and looking into your website don't just show up and you get started. You have a process, an onboarding process, multiple discussions, prior to starting to work with you. So can you tell us a little bit about that process, what it's like if people, want to get a hold or work with Sacred Heart Medicine?
Yeah, I actually do want to back up a little bit though, because you asked about the working with a shaman.
Oh, yeah.
So someone who takes the shamanic approach, maybe not necessarily a shaman, but somebody who approaches it spiritually, you have the set and setting aspect, right? And we talk about that with psychedelics and with plant medicine, but with this, it's more like an intention to heal. And so when you have someone taking that approach, they look at what you're going through more holistically instead of saying, oh, I want to alleviate this one symptom, or I want to make my depression go away. It's not like that, right? It's not like going to a psychiatrist for a pill. We're looking at the big picture and how the tapestry of your life is woven. Someone who errs on the shamanic side of things also might be able to tap into that space without taking a drug. And that's one of the things that, I mean, I would call it a blessing, but it's also a burden. I don't need to take psychedelics to go into the psychedelic space or to see things or to meet you there while you're in that space. And that's kind of the benefit over like hiring a trip sitter or even a doctor. They're not in the space with you. So that's just something I wanted to mention.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of preparation, everyone we work with has a consultation where we get to know each other first and we talk about history, we talk about stability, emotional stability, support network, how to prepare your intention. And that's all done over Zoom. It's not just a phone call. It's not just an intake form that you fill out online. It's very personalized.
So, um, so, and you do multiple Zoom sessions, so you get to know more about the person and their intentions through your ceremonies, right? And it's pretty amazing, and it's a great holistic approach where you approach trauma and you consider trauma and like adverse childhood experiences, and that's kind of where everything in terms of you know that's where everything stems from, is our childhood and from trauma. So I just want to say that that's really, I really enjoy and appreciate that that's kind of your main focus. Have you heard of ACE scores by any chance? This is something that I like researched a little bit a while back, but ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And I think the CDC in partnership with Kaiser did like studies that found a direct correlation between the amount of adverse childhood experiences that people had and their likelihood to to get to fall into like drug abuse or other sorts of like kind of medical conditions that are both mental and also physical. Is that something you looked into at all by any chance?
Yeah, so I do actually have a psychology degree. And so I have a lot of background in, you know, kind of analyzing the childhood and how we develop. And I'd say that adverse childhood events are a huge part of what brings you to things in your adulthood, right? I've never worked with anybody who didn't have some form of childhood trauma. It's just the way that we define trauma that's honestly kind of wrong. Because what's traumatic to a child, someone who's developing like a sense of who they are, who's developing their attachments and their safety, what trauma is to them is completely different than what it is to an adult.
Definitely. And so trauma is obviously like, those experiences are obviously like traumatizing, I guess, obviously. And but and mushrooms can be very like emotional, right? So how is that experience regulated? Because can't that just be like a recipe for, what some people would say like a bad trip, or is that actually something that's very healthy to like confront and experience?
Yeah, it is very healthy to confront and experience. A lot of emotions do come up. There's actually three different kinds of ceremonies you can have, and it's not anything that we have a choice in. It just kind of happens. One is very visual, and so you're kind of taken on a journey, so to speak, where you revisit your childhood, you revisit your life, your choices, and you're given a bird's eye view of everything. Another journey is very visceral. So we have physical reactions, we have emotions, we have cathartic crying or screaming, sometimes throwing up, where things that we've stored in our body, which is actually very much proven scientifically that we store emotions in our body, that stuff gets processed in ceremony as well. Or the third kind of ceremony is a combination of the two.
Nice. And people come to your sanctuary to experience this, right? But don't you also do at home, or I guess tell me about like where these take place, because I know your sanctuary is one place, but you're also open to like, leading these ceremonies in people's homes as well, correct?
Yeah, so I don't. We're actually looking for property right now to build a facility. I have like a vision board up on the website of what I want the facility to look like. But as of right now, we have multiple locations. They're all in residential settings because we don't want the clinical setting. And we also travel around the country when people want to host us. So if they have, sometimes it's a group of employees, sometimes it's a group of friends, we come and set and do the set and setting of the container and walking people through the process of ceremony.
So how do you decide on the location?
It depends on the person. Most people choose to come to one of our locations because separating yourself from your home life is part of doing the work. And walking away from your husband, your wife, your children, your responsibilities allows you to really dive in deeper.
This is kind of coming out from like left field. But I heard that you were mentioned on the Joe Rogan Experience, that you had like a shout out from Joe Rogan in one of the episodes. How did you find out about that? Did you hear that episode, and how did that impact your business?
Yeah, so one of my friends actually sent me a message on Facebook and he linked me to the Joe Rogan YouTube and he said, "Oh my God, you were just mentioned in Joe Rogan, like congratulations." I listened to the episode. It was great. I think it was with Gary Letterman or something, episode 245, I believe. They were talking about psilocybin and the new thing that's going into effect in Oregon in the coming years. And he was like, "Oh, check out this church." That was amazing. I got a ton of people who would never normally find me. So a whole new demographic was opened up for me. And that was actually the explosion of this work. And we've been going nonstop, several months out, booked ever since.
That's amazing. Yeah, congratulations. I actually looked into that measure. Measure 109 was passed in Oregon, I believe, in November of last year, which legalizes mushrooms or mushrooms therapy or for research use. Does that impact your business at all? You already being like a legal operation, or do you see that kind of changing how your business will operate in the future?
It does not impact me at all because we are going the spiritual route. I really don't want to be involved with the medicalization of psilocybin. They're also, it's kind of complicated, right? The way that they're trying to implement the new measure because doctors and therapists are still not going to be the ones administering. It sounds like because of the licensing requirements. And a lot of people have contacted me about learning how I do my things and how I facilitate. But unfortunately, none of them are even interested in sitting in their own ceremonies, which is kind of a big red flag for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it seems like you're just way ahead of the curve on that anyway, and um, really taking like a more holistic and spiritual approach to it, which um, it's definitely something that I'd be interested in experiencing as well. But I might have to book something out a couple months ahead of time. And you offer more than just, or yeah, you help people through more than just psilocybin mushroom therapy, or you do different types. I saw on your website that you do microdosing ceremonies. Correct me if I'm wrong if that's like what it's called, but I think a lot of people have heard more about microdosing in the last year or two. It's become more mainstream or just like talked about. Can you tell us a little bit about microdosing, how that's different than just like one of your more traditional psilocybin experiences?
Absolutely. So the one-on-one ceremony, which is what we've been talking about, is a real deep dive. It's, one facilitator, possibly an apprentice, and the person, and you dive down into yourself. Um, and that's one experience. Microdosing, you're right, it is a term that's getting used more people are familiar with it. A lot of times people come to microdosing the same way they come to Western pills, right? They have a symptom, they want it to go away, and so they take mushrooms instead of taking a pharmaceutical. It's a step in the right direction, but my approach is actually, again, more on the spiritual side. So when you sit down with the mushrooms and you create a friendship and you kind of treat them as a teacher and an ally, what you get out of the microdosing is so much greater. And so I do guide people through microdosing experiences. They're typically only 30 to 45 days long because, again, the intention is not to be on a pill forever to treat your symptoms. It's to work through that next layer of your stuff.
Do you notice the effects of psilocybin mushrooms when you're microdosing?
You absolutely can notice. And the way people experience it is so different person to person. Sometimes they can't get off the couch for a month. Sometimes they have more energy than they've ever had in their life. Sometimes they have exorcisms like randomly happening in the shower. I had one lady who, she said she took her microdose, she sat down and meditated, everything felt fine. When she went to get up, all of a sudden she started throwing up and she like saw beings leaving her body. Like, and we're talking an amount that could not even be considered a microdose is how small it was.
That just goes to show how powerful psilocybin can be in just like your own like mental perspective, right? Just like one little change, and then you could have a completely different outlook on life, at least for the near future, but hopefully something more long term that's like beneficial to your own like soul and being.
For sure.
Yeah. So how could people get a hold of you, learn more about Sacred Heart Medicine Sanctuary, and potentially even schedule a ceremony?
So I have a website. It is sacredheartmedicine.us. You can schedule a consultation on the website. We're also on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
Nice. Okay. Well, Nadia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was such a pleasure having you and learning more about Sacred Heart Medicine.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything, let's see, before you leave, is there anything else that you might want to say or tell people, or is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
You know, I would say that with all of this decriminalization and legalization of therapy, you're always going to have people who want to go the clinical route. And what we do is the other option. For the people who don't want to go the clinical route, people who want to go the spiritual route. But when choosing this work, regardless of what plant medicine you're sitting with, to follow your heart, to go with your gut.
Thank you. Yeah, that's powerful. And everyone, please go check out or visit sacredheartmedicine.com. I
.us.
yeah, dot us. Yeah, thank you. I'll put the link to their website below as well. Nadia, I'm a big fan of what you're doing. It's something that the world needs. The world needs more holistic care and attention, and people really need to like think more about their own trauma and childhood experiences as it relates to their current behavior and the things they're struggling with. So I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and I'm excited to learn more about it and self-educate. Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And everyone, thank you for listening. Have a great day.